minute, Jack. This is a friendly celebration.
I don't much like the way you celebrate.
Hello, everybody. It's Four Men in America. We've got Jeff Utsch, Ken Bennett, and Paul Fitch joining us today. And we are off and running. And first topic of conversation, I think, would be Iran. What do you guys think? Who's
all right?
Who wants
this
to
could get a lot worse before it gets better?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, who would like to take the first shot or talk about this?
Yeah, there's been a great podcast I just listened to between Ted Cruz, the senator, and Tucker Carlson. You know, I'm a big fan of both of them, and it was a real shame how I don't know if any of you have listened to it, but I'd recommend our listeners listen to it. It got a little contentious, and you know, I can tell. Anyway, very frustrating. But I am, even though I admire and look up to Tucker Carlson in many ways, I do think a way to measure if our foreign policy is in line with America First is just to decide how does this affect America and our national security threat abroad. And, you know, so I am one that I do stand with President Trump, and I do not completely understand how the other side, and they're not necessarily just isolationists, because you can't just say they're isolationists, just people who disagree and think things could spin out of control with Iran. But especially we already see with Israel going in, there's nobody coming to Iran's aid. I mean, Russia's not coming. There's rumors of some Chinese planes coming in. We don't necessarily know what's going on there. But those who are worried about, even Soleimani, when we took him out, a wider spread war in the Middle East, you know, taking on Iran right now to make sure they don't have a nuclear weapon is critical to our foreign policy and putting America first. It is not incongruent. So, you know, one could argue back in the day of going into Syria, is that America first? Maybe not, you know, but going into Iran right now or supporting the Israelis who are, and you know, I would absolutely be in favor if the Israelis can't use the mother of all bombs to take out their centrifuges or where their primary, you know, nuclear manufacturing facility is under the mountain, that if we have to do it, we do it. Because if somebody says they want to kill you, you know, because one of the arguments being made there that we've talked about is, you know, the mullahs and the Khomeini are saying death to America, Americans, and we want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. I believe them, and we all should. And we've already seen what they would do if they had the power, a la October 7th, and putting a ring of fire, what they called it, around Israel. And it doesn't necessarily have to do all with Israel. And a lot of people are like, we're like the puppet of Israel. No, I don't think we are. We are doing what our interests at home are, and that interest is making sure that Iran does not have a nuclear bomb. And so I think you can be an American first. I think you can not want to get into foreign wars. I think you can be all these things and still say Iran should not have a nuclear bomb. And so that's my opinion. I don't think we should worry about regime change. If it happens, it happens. But if we try to control it, we've already seen that we can't do that very well. And the local population needs to happen. So we take care of our interests, and then we support the people over there to decide what they want to do.
Yeah, regime change has to happen internally, right?
I think so.
Internally, they've got to decide they want their country back. So yeah, so I pretty much agree with you, Jeff. Comments, Ken or Paul? Jump in there.
No.
Yeah. You're older.
I completely agree. I think the fundamental issue and the reason I support Israel going in and us supporting Israel, and I would prefer us not have to, you know, take direct action ourselves. But Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. That's just my bottom line. And I think that's where, Trump's fundamentally coming at this whole thing. And I have a lot of trust in, I read an article yesterday about how the intel of the Israeli government is a little bit different than the intel that we have at the U.S. The U.S. government level. And if those are a little bit different, that's okay. But I have quite a bit of trust in the Israeli government, and if they think that they were as close to getting a nuclear weapon as they must have in order to have acted the way they did, I'll give that the benefit of the doubt.
Ken, and what the counter argument to that is that I've heard is that the Israelis and some American leaders have been saying they're about ready to get a bomb for the last 20 years. And in some ways that's true, but also Israel and others have taken actions to make sure that that's been postponed, whether it be through a virus within the software. I think just Israel being able to download some kind of virus into that software that had something to do with their program put them back a couple years, just that. So it is possible that they've almost been ready to have an atomic bomb on many occasions, and that has been thwarted on many occasions. And my feeling is, look, felons, especially violent felons in America, are not allowed to carry weapons. It's illegal. Many still do, but it's because they have not acted responsibly with their Second Amendment rights. And on a world level, Iran has not acted responsibly with any of the powers they've been given. And it is up to if the international community is not going to do it, then somebody has to do it to preserve world peace. And I'm a firm believer that, not that America has to be the police of the world, but completely looking at our interests, self-interest. They say want death to America and death to Israel. I take them at their word, and we need to take that gun away before they get it.
Paul, comments?
Well, I was going to comment on the regime change thing that we all, I think, agreed on we shouldn't do. If you look back at Ukraine, we did a regime change there, and we're at the edge of a thermonuclear war, which shows we didn't do it well, and it was ill-advised. So I don't think changing this one is going to be any better accomplished. But I agree with everybody here that Iran has stated, and one of the things that we're worried about is not the giant nuclear bomb that they send over on a ballistic missile. We're worried about the suitcase bombs that people were able to take. If they may have already brought them across, we don't know. But that's the thing I'm worried about.
Yeah, the ones they give to Hamas or Hezbollah.
Yeah,
right?
Anything.
I mean, they'll give it if they have it. They'll give it to anybody. So.
Well, just remember what 9/11 did, or Pearl Harbor.
Right.
I mean, we had 3,000 people killed on 9/11, and about the same on Pearl Harbor. I think a little less than that, but it threw the whole United States, just totally upside down, and not for a little while. By the way, if everybody remembers how travel was and everything else. And so, like a suitcase-sized nuclear bomb or even a dirty bomb, think about what that could do to the big cities in the United States or anywhere in the nation. I mean, look, if they can smuggle it into Tel Aviv or somewhere else, they could smuggle it in here. Our shipping containers they don't inspect all the containers coming into the ports. I mean, it's a random, haphazard way to do it. And so,
if you've seen the movie Sum of All Fears, that's pretty spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like a suitcase-sized weapon, wasn't it, Ken?
It was in a Coke machine.
It was in a vending machine that ended up below the stadium, I
Football
guess,
stadium or something.
of a Super
Football
Bowl
stadium.
or a football game or something
Okay.
in Baltimore, and that was kind of the premise behind that.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, my
that-
favorite team, the Baltimore Colts back in the day. The least
There
they
you
could
go.
have done is put it under Pittsburgh or something.
that's right.
I
Well,
joke.
They moved to Indianapolis, Jeff. So
Yeah, I know the Traders. I still like Indianapolis Colts.
I do
but
too. I
Just
I,
a little different from
yeah.
Baltimore.
I love the Baltimore Colts. I was a Johnny Unitas guy. So
Me and you both.
Yeah.
Yes.
so
I was Roman Gabriel and the L.A. Rams.
Oh yeah,
My
sure.
grandpa was an L.A. Rams fan.
Well, he was a
Merlin Olsen, and Deacon
Oh,
Jones.
yeah. Well, Merlin Olsen
That's
played for
awesome.
one of the Utah colleges, right?
Utah State.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. So one of the things I have heard is that this information that it's interesting that some of the pundits that are on some of them are on YouTube. A lot of them are on YouTube, coming up with all kinds of stuff about this Iran and Israel thing. But I mean, they come up with some doozies, and they don't have any information whatsoever, right? So I think they're just looking for clicks. But they said I read a really good article about. They said the Chinese are landing their planes, some 747 type cargo planes, close to the border of Iran, but they're not actually landing in Iran. It's one of the, I don't know if it's Uzbekistan or one of the stands right close
Well,
to
that
Iran.
may be because they don't want to accidentally get hit.
Oh yeah, I said yeah. I told my wife, I told Patty, I said they're not going to be flying around Iran's skies right now because Israel's ruling the skies right now. They've gotten rid of all the Russian air defense. That's pretty obvious. So then I listened to another guy, an F-14 pilot that retired. He was a Top Gun guy. And he had a friend on his show that was a KC-135 tanker pilot. And they described about all that's going on. And it's pretty obvious. Israel only has 7 tankers. Okay, air tankers, air refuelers. It's obvious that there's more than that operating in those skies right now. So we're heavily over there. We probably have at least 25 KC-135s or the newer version flying over there and refueling their airplanes for them. We're also providing a lot of a lot of weapons, right? A lot of delivery systems. And we're giving them gas for their airplanes, JP-4. I guess Trump's had a bunch of JP-4 pumped into Israel to stock them up good. So we're doing a lot of things on the side. And I'm like you guys. I don't think Trump wants to pull the trigger. I think he wants to see if Israel can do the job. And I think he believes they can. But just in case, I think we have a plan that if they don't, that we might have to do something. But I don't think he really wants to do more than he's doing right now.
Which says a lot about Trump.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You cannot.
Yeah.
I don't think you can, but I don't think it'd be credible to accuse Trump of being a warmonger.
Oh, yeah.
He values life, and I do respect that about him.
Yeah.
He's finding ways. He even now he's trying to work out something.
Yeah.
And with the mullahs over there, and I think it's applaudable.
Sure. And I think you've got people pressuring him to do this, which guys like Lindsey Graham's. I think Lindsey Graham's gone out of his. He's off his rocker now. He's ready to go anywhere and bomb anybody anytime. But I think he hung around John McCain too much. I think that's where he got some of that stuff. You remember McCain was
learned. The thing is when you hear people on the right, because there is a little split. Look, it's not 50-50.
Yeah, they said. I don't mean to interrupt, Jeff, but I saw a poll. They said only 16% of the MAGA folks support doing something in Iran, direct activity.
How many?
16%.
Oh, I thought it was, if it was necessary, I thought it was just the flip. But whatever it is, there is a split off part of the MAGA side, or even the Republicans in general, who I'm not going to call them again isolationists, but because, our intervention in Libya didn't turn out too well. In Iraq, it didn't turn out too well. In the Sudan, it didn't turn out too well. In Syria, it hasn't turned out too well. I mean, you go through these histories and just say,
Libya,
look,
right?
maybe, Saddam wasn't a great guy, but, he was also very anti, terrorist and
anti-Iran. They kept Iran busy for years. They hated Iran's guts.
So there's some arguments there, but there's also some arguments that some of our intervention, like freeing Eastern Europe, or unifying Germany and creating a Western Europe, or Japan, or you can just go down the list. So it hasn't all been failure, but I also think intent matters, and I think it's a good rule of thumb that if it doesn't directly affect us, at home, we'd be better off spending time and money at home, because we got some serious problems here. So I think both sides have a good point of view, but I don't understand the people who are saying let Iran have a nuclear bomb, and they don't get that threat. I don't get that.
Yeah. That doesn't make sense. Yeah, agree with you. Yeah, that would not be a good thing, and we know they would use it at the earliest opportunity. So and Israel knows that. So I guess did you guys hear that last week they started on the 13th, and I heard, and I hadn't heard this before, that the Atomic Energy Commission issued some kind of statement that they were just right on the verge of having a nuclear weapon.
Yes.
And that kind of triggered Netanyahu to go ahead. Have you guys heard that?
Well, I don't know what the commission was, but they were talking about,
or the UN nuclear guys, whoever it was, ones that do the inspections. Yeah. So they
the grade of uranium. The grade of uranium,
along with their own intelligence, and evidently they've had special forces in Iran working for some time, right? Because they're getting all these, and they're using our small diameter bombs to go after all these generals and nuclear scientists. You can take a small diameter bomb that's made by Boeing and Raytheon and fly it through the window of an apartment building and just take out one apartment. So I mean, the technology's there, and the Israelis are using the small diameter bombs. So I think that's what Trump's waiting for. I think he's waiting to see. It's right now. The latest I heard is we're in a 2-week window right now, that he will decide something within 2 weeks. So Israel's got time to make hay and get things going, and they're doing a pretty good job. Anything else you get?
I think on this, there's been some discussion of taking out the head, Khomeini, and I think he's like 86 years old now, been around forever. Unless you know how the dominoes are going to fall after that.
Yeah,
I agree that probably isn't the best idea. That's not our call, and starting to take out leaders of countries,
right?
Unless we know he does have a bomb and ready to put his finger on it, then that would change.
And I heard he's got cancer too.
Yeah, well, and that would make it more dangerous if they did have a bomb, because what's he got to lose?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So who do you think, with all this loss of generals and all this damage that Israel's done to their military and their Quds force and the rest of them, who do you think's actually calling the shots now? You think somebody else is going to call Trump and say, "Uncle"? Think that's possible? No, you don't think so, Ken?
When you thought about it.
Yeah. There's some.
You got. I thought we had a law about political assassinations.
Oh, we do.
Yes.
And and
Unless you're
well,
Obama and you can do it with a drone.
yeah, but just seems to, there's a difference between taking out a foreign government's military and taking out a foreign government. And
Right.
but I thought we were constrained in that.
Excuse me.
Yeah, we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be constrained. Yeah, I think you're right, Paul. So, yeah, I think I've heard, and I don't know, I haven't heard it out of Trump's mouth, but I've heard that he doesn't want to take out Khomeini right now. He's voting against it.
I think he's seeing the long-term effects, as Jeff kind of indicated.
Yeah, I think so
we
too.
don't know which way the dominoes are going to fall if we take him out. You know,
But what about this? Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Well, I was just going to say, people may not like their leader, but they don't want somebody else killing him. You know, that sort of thing.
But does it justify, I mean, I've heard this also debated. If we know that Iran is trying to take out Trump, like, we've all heard there's hit squads in the United States.
Right.
If that's verified, does that warrant the United States going in and taking out their head? Does that warrant, if a foreign nation puts a bounty on our president, I don't care if it's Biden or anybody,
Yeah.
as much as I didn't like Biden,
Yeah.
still, it is the head of our nation. Does that warrant either us taking out their head or going to war with that nation? I mean, I think it's a valid question. And if they have done it, why hasn't our reaction been a little stronger, unless either we don't believe it or we just don't think they could actually pull it off? Like if you had Cuba put a bounty on or actually sent people up here to take out Trump, I just can't see us standing by and not taking some type of retaliatory action on that. I don't know. I think it's a question we should discuss.
Well, yeah, and that kind of all goes back to John Kennedy, right? And his assassination. The story was that Oswald was working for, he was a communist working for the commies, right?
It just depends on which story you listen to.
Well, yeah, I know, but
there's a lot of stories out
right.
there.
But the one that we were all fed by the Warren Commission was that he got his training and got his marksmanship training and etc. And by the bad guys. And was that a master plan in one of those countries to take out our president? So,
well, there's been so many rumors about that. The mafia, the Lyndon Johnson.
Heard the mafia.
There's no telling. And as far as I'm concerned, the Warren Commission report. Anytime you hide the information for 50 or 100 years, you're just waiting for everybody that's going to go to jail to die before the word gets out, as far as I'm concerned.
Did you guys see that on TV?
What's that?
I guess you did,
latest,
Paul. I don't know, Jeff or Ken. Did you see Oswald shoot? Did you see him get killed by Ruby?
No, I was.
Yeah.
I
watched it live.
I was 7 or 8 years old.
You were 7.
And
Okay.
Watching the funeral was one of my earliest memories.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't born yet.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was live on television. They were walking him through the parking garage. You remember that, Paul?
Oh, absolutely.
And he just walked right up to him and shot him, man. I mean, they freaked out the CBS. Man, they didn't know what was going on, right?
What year was Kennedy killed? 63?
63, yeah.
So I was 4. I'm sorry, I was 4 years old.
All right. Well, you still remember the funeral, though.
His funeral was one of my earliest memories.
That's
sitting
amazing.
there watching the funeral.
That's amazing. So, yeah. Go ahead, Ken.
I was in class in high school when that happened.
Yeah, I was too.
I was a junior.
We came out of history class, and a bunch of kids in the hallway, and some girls were crying, and they told us that Kennedy had been shot, and we didn't believe it till we got down to the cafeteria, and then we could see it had to be true, because everybody was shattered.
Well,
so,
I remember when Elvis died. Exactly where I was.
Yeah, there you go.
I think I saw Elvis live. my goal is to be the oldest person alive to have ever seen Elvis, because I
Elvis.
saw him in 1976
Yeah, that's
at the
good.
Richmond Coliseum when I was like 8.
Oh, good. Patty saw him in Vegas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of his Vegas trips.
I was flying across Saigon in my UH-1, listening to AFVN, just kind of just monitoring it because it had rock and roll, at the our age group music. And the disc jockey said something about Kennedy being assassinated. And I looked over at the other pilot and I said, why are they bringing that up now in July? And then the story went on. Of course, it was Robert Kennedy, not John Kennedy.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Talk about deja vu all over again.
Yeah.
Because I was, alive and kicking. I was 17 years old when Kennedy was assassinated, when John Kennedy was assassinated. So I just couldn't understand why they were bringing that up in the middle of July, since he got assassinated in November.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So, I think that's a good point, though, Jeff, you made about if one of our leaders was threatened, if our president was actually, given a threat like that, would we respond or should we respond? That's a good question.
Well, now, wait a minute. I assume that there's probably no less than 6 to 12 governments in the world that have already put out a bounty on Trump. I assume that exists right now.
Sure, that's possible. Yeah, you might be
And,
right.
well,
Ken.
my point is,
But if we knew about it specifically, you're saying, Jeff, that we would act.
Yeah, well, if we have firm intelligence that it's coming from the head of the officially sanctioned by the government,
Okay.
then somehow that's a red line.
I see.
It might be.
In effect, that's a declaration of war.
Yeah, I was going to say that would be.
it is.
Yeah, that would be a declaration of war, really. So.
I mean, if it's coming from the not a subgroup, not a splinter group, but from the nation itself, either the executive branch, the legislative branch, and we can prove, because you got to make sure it's not a rumor. But if it is officially sanctioned and you can show, then why would we wait until, if Japan would have declared war on us, we wouldn't have just waited for them to bomb us before we reacted.
Mm-hmm.
We would have been better prepared.
Yeah.
Why wait till they kill the president or actually, start shooting at him to do that? To me, that's an act of war. So there's got to be a consequence.
Well, maybe there's a red line we don't know about.
I worry about Trump's life.
Oh yeah, I agree, Ken. Yeah, he's got a
I'm
lot
worried about it, but not necessarily from the Iranians or anybody else. I'm worried about it from Democrats.
Paul worries
I
about.
think if somebody's willing to give their own life, you can take somebody out.
Yeah. Well, look at the guy up in. Look at the guy up in Minnesota.
Anybody can kill the president if they're not trying to live through the program.
Yeah. Look at the guy up in Minnesota. He was in Tim Walz's administration. Big hardcore Democrat, right? And he goes nuts and kills. And actually, I knew a guy. We have a friend down here from Minnesota that knew the Hoffmans, which were the people that were wounded up there. We're good friends of theirs, and didn't know the other two as well. But they were Democrats, and they had just voted against the party line up there for something. I think it was to give.
It was medical care for illegals.
Medical care for illegals. Right. They had just voted against that just a couple of days before this guy went after him. So, but that's a good example. Yeah, somebody can go offline. And, we all worry about Trump.
We've got to decrease the divisiveness. And I really think it is by refocusing and re-educating and teaching people what used to unite us.
Yep.
The core fundamental beliefs, as in the Declaration of Independence, as in our first principle of liberty.
That would certainly be a long-term solution. Yeah.
Well, and it is. Look, and that's the only solution we have. Because this is not a surgery. There is no surgical solution.
Right now we have rock and sock'em robots. Jeff.
Yeah, well, this is therapy. We got to
Right.
pay the price. You know, we didn't get here in a day, and we're not getting out of it in a day.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's going to be a long-term process. But if somehow we could find that common ground again, but it's very difficult to find that common ground if we don't know what that common ground ever was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, if you have people that believe in DEI as preached by the left, that is incongruent with American values. It is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Sure.
you know, it's just like saying, can you be a communist and put your arm to the square and say that you support and defend the Constitution? You cannot do
can't.
it.
That's right.
You can't do it. I mean,
Exactly.
you can do it, but you would be a liar
Yeah.
if you did, because it's incongruent with American values. And I believe the same to be true as if you're a socialist, by the way. So how far, you know, into that spectrum do you get before you can't actually do it? But I think the founding principles is where, you know, we can disagree on tariffs, tax rates, abortion, and, you know, trade policy, and, you know, welfare checks, and all. Those don't necessarily affect the foundations of our nation. But when you start getting into treating people unequal based on race, okay, when you start getting into chipping away at the foundation of our nation, that we were founded on a slaveocracy, which is false narratives. You know, when you get into that God doesn't give us our unalienable rights, that government does. When you get into that government is the arbiter of their own powers instead of the people, and restrained by the Constitution. You know, when you get into the Constitution being looked at as a impediment to where you want to go, we have a problem. When you don't understand that the legislative branch should be the most powerful. All these things we used to agree on. And as a commonality, and we don't anymore. And I think that's really what's killing us.
But on your point of common ground, Jeff, I think it's important. For example, we've got a budget. The state budget is kind of at a crisis point here in Arizona. The House of Representatives passed one budget only with Republican votes, and the Senate Republicans have been negotiating with Governor Hobbs, Democrat, and the House can't, at least there's some comments from people in the House that, you know, and within our party that, well, there's no way we could compromise with a Democrat governor, but we have a Democrat governor. And so I see a lot of wrangling going on within Republicans here in Arizona between the House budget that the far right and the Freedom Caucus is saying, well, this is the conservative budget, and the Senate budget is baloney because they've even negotiated with the governor on it. But the difference between the two budgets is $300 million out of $17.6 billion.
Wow. Yeah.
It's less than 2%. So a budget that even a Democrat governor, despised by many Republicans in Arizona as she is, Katie Hobbs, the budget that she has agreed with the Senate Republicans is less than 2% different than the House Republican budget that you've got the far right Freedom Caucus saying this is the only budget worth anything. And so I think we do ourselves a disfavor when we don't identify where the common ground exists. I couldn't agree with you more. And that's just the state money. There's $45 billion. The state budget is about $17 billion. There's another $6 billion of state money. The state budget's really about $22, $23 billion. But $45 billion of federal and other money kind of gets commingled with it. The state of Arizona budget is in the neighborhood of about $70 billion. A $300 million difference between what the far right group says is a conservative budget and the criticism that they are leveling against their own Republicans over in the Senate as being a not conservative budget. The difference is $300 million. If you take that out of the 70 billion with all the federal money and everything, it's less than 1% difference. So there's more common ground than I think sometimes we want to admit.
So Ken, is the $300 million, is that spread out over several programs, or are there specific programs that the Republicans want to?
No, it's spread out over several programs. The biggest chunk of that $300 million difference, the House, 200 million of it is some cuts in Medicaid, or in Arizona we call it Access, Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System. The biggest chunk, 2/3 of that difference, is that the very far right part of the House put $200 million less in the Arizona budget for Medicaid than the Senate and the governor have in there. And you say $200 million, that's a lot of money. Well, even that alone, Medicaid in Arizona is probably $3.5 billion of state of Arizona money and about $17 billion of federal money. So even $200 million in one single program, Medicaid, is probably about 1% of the total Medicaid program in Arizona, if you combine state and federal money. So even this huge difference, or what sounds like a huge difference between the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans and the governor, is a 1% issue.
Yeah. And with your laws in Arizona, Ken, isn't it true that the Republicans will probably, Arizona is up, it could be up for a little increase in Medicaid money because you're one of the states that does not give Medicaid to illegals? Because some states that give money to illegals are going to have money taken away, but you're going to be rewarded for doing that.
One of the big issues, it's not even illegals.
Yeah.
Probably the
working
biggest
people,
issue
working people
is a requirement to work,
right,
or seek work.
You're going to be rewarded. Arizona is going to be rewarded for that.
Arizona already
has
a work requirement.
Yeah.
To be on government paid for health care.
And I think the feds are going to reward you for that.
Even the debate at the federal level with the big beautiful one bill, or whatever they're calling it, and others that are saying no, it cuts too much. That difference at the federal level is really whether or not to enforce a work requirement on people to receive Medicaid.
Exactly.
And Arizona already has that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're arguing about something at the federal level that Arizona already does.
Yeah.
And so, we probably would, no matter which way it goes at the federal level, Arizona already has a workforce or a working requirement in order to qualify for Medicaid.
So Ken, let me ask you this. Paul and I were at a meeting, my nonprofit. We had the House Majority Leader on the Republican side, Michael Carbone, talk to us, and he was going over their small nuclear plant programs, which I really like. But I gave them my card because, and offered through my grant to do kind of a professional development, oath of office, constitutional discussion, these kind of things. But I wanted to ask, do you think some of the Republicans in the House on that $300 million are just trying to say, hey, we're going to stand on principle, and that's why they're doing it?
Yeah, they just, there are some Republicans that cannot stomach the idea of agreeing to something that Katie Hobbs is ultimately going to agree to.
Right. Okay.
And
so in that, and that's why these, look, I love one of the greatest lessons of the founding era. I really believe this. It is just, I think studying the Constitutional Convention, we learned so much about politics because, you had the Constitutional Convention and then the ratification debates afterwards and how the anti-federalists came around. And what I really think is important, one of the takeaways, when to stand on principle and when to compromise, we learned from the founding fathers. Look, if the vision is the same, but we disagree on how to get there, there's room for compromise.
Yeah.
If the visions are incongruent and you want to go left and I want to go right, then it's worth standing on principle. But these kind of things, I think because the opposing side will take advantage of that rift and drive a wedge in there and split it. And that's kind of the weakness of the conservative side is we get so picky and just like the Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson debate, boy, they have more in common than not. But to see it get that nasty,
yeah, and that's the point I'm trying.
It really was a terrible.
So, what's your prediction, Ken? What do you predict is going to happen? They're going to agree to it.
They'll go with the Senate governor budget. The governor, that's $17.6 billion.
Yeah.
The House Republican only budget is $17.3 billion.
Okay.
And the three most important numbers in Arizona are 16, 31, and 1.
Mm-hmm.
To get something through the 30-member Senate,
Yeah.
you got to have at least 16 votes.
Yeah.
You got to have 31 out of the 60 or in the House, but you got to have the one governor sign it.
Mm-hmm.
I was the Senate president the first 4 years that Janet Napolitano was the governor back in 2003, 4, 5, and 6. And I think I mentioned last week.
You told the story, and I'm unfortunately
one of the late.
Yeah, Jeff missed the story, but it was Well, I guess you were here last week, Jeff, right?
Well, I was last week, but
Yeah.
I don't think Ken was, so that must have been 2 weeks
Oh,
ago.
it was 2 weeks
No, it was
ago.
2
then,
weeks
yeah.
ago. 2 weeks
Yeah, he
ago,
told
yeah.
the story about how he had to sit down, run between rooms, between Napolitano in one room and the House guys in another room to get them to agree to the budget.
The House budget
that's
negotiators would, the governor would not be in the same room as the House budget negotiators. And so I had to run from one room to the other. We started at 9 p.m. at night and we finished at 3:30 the next morning.
Oh my gosh.
And that's
That
how we
sounds
got
like
a budget.
high stakes bingo right there. I hope they paid you well.
That's how we got a budget. But if you want that one governor vote to go with your, so
You were the
what's going to
mediator.
happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They needed
What's
a
going to
mediator.
happen? What's going to happen is, in order for the governor to sign a budget, she's going to have to get some compromise on some things that she wants. When she does, not if, but when she does, that will bring some Democrats on to the budget in the Senate. Apparently, they're already there. The Senate Republicans, the Senate Democrats, and the governor have pretty much agreed to a budget at $17.6 billion. But the House Republicans, for some reason, thought, no, let's just go on our own and pass 17.3. So my prediction, Don, is that the 17.6 billion budget will prevail ultimately. And I just got a phone call before this podcast from my former administrative assistant at the Senate, and the far right guys in the Senate that are introducing amendments today to try to pull the 17.6 billion down to 17.3 are losing. And they're mad, and I'm sure there's going to be 4 or 5 Freedom Caucus Republicans in the Senate that won't vote for the budget, but the other 12 or 13 Republicans and 8 or 10 of the Democrats will vote for it, and it will prevail.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's going to be so. You've got what you got till June 28th, right?
June 30th.
June 30th.
Yeah, I'd like to hear the freedom. I'm normally more of a Freedom Caucus kind of guy, an Andy Biggs kind of guy. But it'd be interesting to see what their arguments are, Ken. I don't know what they are, but as you put it, it seems like we're pretty close, and that there's some hills that are worth dying on, and this probably isn't one of them.
Yeah. Well,
you mentioned Andy Biggs. Andy Biggs was the president of the Senate when Obama expanded Medicaid massively.
Yeah.
Right.
And he screamed bloody murder that he would never let that happen. But he ultimately did. He let the vote when it became obvious that, well, it was when Governor Jan Brewer, who had said months or years before that she would not support Medicaid expansion. But then when Obama put so much money into the Medicaid expansion program that she couldn't.
Well, yeah, I mean, back then, the point was everybody else was getting the money, all the other states. So it was just like, no, it's kind of like, no, I'm not taking your ice cream. Well, if everybody else is getting ice cream.
Andy Biggs voted no. Andy Biggs.
Yeah.
Voted no on the budget, but he let the bill go to the floor and the Senate as a whole, and the governor passed it.
Yeah.
So that is going to be an interesting. Yeah. We're going to have a very interesting governor's race in the Republican primary between him and Taylor Robeson, and Andy's going to have to justify. He could have stopped Medicaid expansion, but he didn't. Well. But he voted against a budget that ultimately most of his Republican buddies and the governor, Republican Jan Brewer, passed.
And you think somebody's carrying those receipts?
Oh, you bet.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. That's really interesting. Our budget, I told you guys the Florida budget was in a big tangled mess too, and the Republicans couldn't agree. In the Senate and the House, we have a supermajority. They can't agree on a budget. Well, they supposedly came to a compromise, but I don't know what the compromise is yet. I haven't studied it very much, and I don't know if we're going to get a property tax cut or a sales tax cut, because DeSantis says he would not sign a budget with a sales tax cut. So he's the one guy there that can put the kibosh on all of it. So we'll see. But I don't know how many legislators there are in the House and the Senate in Florida, but there's two magic numbers. Yeah, I think we have 120 in the House and 60 in the Senate.
Wow, so that's pretty big.
So your numbers are just double off.
Yeah, just about double.
We have 60 and 30. So the magic numbers in each state is half plus one of the House, half plus one of the Senate, and the governor.
Yeah. There you go.
Those are the three magic numbers in every state. And at the congressional level, it's 51, 218, and 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There you go.
So, Don, I wanted to bring up one other thing.
Sure, go ahead.
Throw a grenade in the room before I leave.
Okay.
This is kind of like starting the bar fight. You throw the bottle and run out of the room, hope everybody else fights, and you get out of there. So I'm doing that right before I have to leave here.
Okay.
But, I think it is time that the federal government take over the governance of Washington, D.C., as it is allowed in the Constitution of the United States. And I think when you have Republicans control the House and the Senate and the president, it really is a shame to be in Washington, D.C. and look at the crime numbers and what's going on there. And it's an embarrassment, really it is, to have foreign dignitaries come into town and have to be worried about carjackings or whatever else is going on. And obviously the Democrats cannot run that city well through the system we currently
or any
have.
city.
Yeah. And this is what's so surprising. And this is why months ago I said I would rather not do one big beautiful bill. If you want to rock 'em, so where's the rock'em sock'em robots?
Yeah.
It is stalled.
Yeah.
Okay. We have, how many bills could we have passed?
Yeah.
One
No,
or
I
two
agree with
pagers,
you. Yeah.
To be victorious on little things, and we'd see progress, and we're losing momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And we could do a federal law just like that. Not Trump coming out and saying we don't want men and women's sports or boys and girls sports, but a federal law, okay, based on the 14th Amendment. Yeah, you could base it on a lot of different federal
Sure.
codes.
Yeah.
You could, well, anyway, we could get in this Civil Rights Act of
Yeah.
1964 and 5. You could do a lot of different things. But why are we doing these things?
Yeah. I know.
A
Yeah,
quick
we're-
bill saying, okay, we're going to phase out in the next 2 years the governorship, the mayor in Washington, D.C., and it's going to be managed by a committee. Create a new committee.
Yeah.
And you're going to appoint, and this is the way, and we're cleaning this town up. You got the money to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to complain.
Well, I know
about-
Trump wants it cleaned up for sure. He's talked about it many times.
So anyway, I pulled the pin, threw it in the room, and I'll see you guys next week.
Okay. Okay, Jeff, you'll be
All
here, right?
You say,
Yes, yeah, okay. Appreciate you guys.
Okay. Thanks for the grenade. So yeah, that's a good point. I think, I mean, Ken and Paul, it's my opinion that Mike Johnson is focused on his 218 votes, and he's really afraid to disturb that. With almost any other product coming through the House, right? He can offend somebody here or somebody there, or lose somebody on the big beautiful bill, and you don't know if Thune doesn't get it through the Senate as a fairly clean bill. It has to go back to the House to be voted on again, I think once they pass that bill, I think what he's saying is, I think that'll start happening. I think they'll start processing more bills and doing more things. But right now and Thune says he's going to have this done by 4th of July. So we'll see.
okay.
Right? Yeah.
Well, you're making the same point I made about Arizona and every state.
Exactly.
Half plus one votes in a legislative body
Yeah.
is the most important number in that legislative body.
That's right. Yeah.
That's how anything and everything gets done.
Yeah.
And so when I was Senate president, how do you get 16? Now, I knew I had a Democrat governor, so I really wasn't looking for 16. I knew that I needed half or more, hopefully, of my 16 Republicans.
Yeah. And then a few
But
Democrats.
I knew I needed 2/3 of the Democrats too,
Sure.
or she wasn't going to sign it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The budgets that I did with Napolitano for 4 years, we usually had 24, 25 votes out of the 30 in the Senate. We would lose a couple guys on the far right. She would lose a couple on the far left, and we got something done. Now, there are some people who despise me. Some Republicans despise me that I made any deal with Napolitano for my 4 years.
Oh, I'm sure.
But they don't understand how a legislative body works. You got to have the numbers.
Yeah, I was going to say they had the same feeling about her that these people now do about Hobbs, right? Wasn't any different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because she
But there are many Republicans in Arizona that call me a rhino because I negotiated successfully with Napolitano.
Right. Well, because you compromised doesn't qualify you as a rhino. It qualifies you as a good legislator.
And yet I got the largest tax. She signed the largest tax cut in the history of Arizona.
There you go. See?
During my term as Senate president.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We also increased spending more than Republicans alone would have liked, but we also got a large tax cut too.
Yeah. Good job.
That leads me to an interesting, I don't know what the word is, but we have a representative republic nationally. But when it comes down to the law, it's basically majority rules. It's a democracy.
Well,
so we have a democratic
republic. We have a democratic republic.
Yeah.
And even though when people say we live in a democracy, that's technically incorrect.
Yeah.
We live in a republic, and that's what the founders gave us. But it's a democratic republic, and even a republic works on a majority of the votes in whatever legislative
Of
body
the representatives.
Yeah.
is considering an item. And it really comes down to a majority of whatever body you're looking at. If it's the 435 members of the Arizona House or the U.S. House of Representatives, half plus one is 218. And that's why Mike Johnson is focused entirely on 218.
Yeah, exactly. And we do, and it's a democratic republic at the national level, but at the state level, it really is just, it runs as a democratic system where the majority, you have to have a majority to get things done in your state legislature. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking Johnson's, look, I just kind of had the picture of a sugar cube when you put it in the coffee, how it starts falling apart. and that's what he sees. And he's got to kind of keep all the granules together.
Yeah.
Before it hits the bottom of the cup.
He's as soon as
so he's hyper focused on keeping that cube solid before it dissolves and you can't.
And that's a great analogy, Paul, because the other day I saw where some senator was talking about he doesn't like the what do they call it, the SALT, the SALT tax. Which is which is the credit for paying your state taxes thing that New York, and I don't know who else is behind that. New York's big on that. As soon as they talked about reducing that back down again, some New York congressman said, "Well, then I won't vote for it." So he's got this one guy that'll throw the whole thing in the trash because he can't get his SALT tax break. So it's very sensitive with a lot of people. So yeah, I think we're right. I think Mike Johnson is really just he's trying to herd the cats, right? Remember that commercial about herding the cats?
Right.
I remember that during that
435 balls in the air.
Yeah, you remember that Super Bowl? About I don't know when it was, 10 years ago. They had a Super Bowl commercial where the cats were all running around and the cowboys were herding the cats and lassoing them, chasing them. And that was one of the great commercials of all time for the Super Bowl. So anyway, okay, guys. Well, hey, it's really good to see you on Juneteenth. Did you do anything special today?
No.
No?
Went to Walmart.
I took a nap.
So Ken, how was your trip to Utah? Did everything go okay?
You know what Juneteenth is, right? You know what Juneteenth is, right?
Well, sort of. I'm not. I've been confused over the years. So I thought it was like a. It's the day that the Union General informed the troops about a year and a half after Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay.
That the blacks were free.
Oh, okay.
Informed the blacks in Texas about the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah.
Right.
Which brings
I think it was in Texas. It was in Texas.
In Galveston.
And they had continued to fight the war, and with the lack of communication and technology and everything,
Mm-hmm.
it took a year and a half before some people realized that a year and a half before President Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation. But Juneteenth is the day that the Union General informed the troops that, hey, the blacks are free.
Good. That's a good.
I got a question. You guys know about all this stuff. It's my impression that Lincoln did not free any of the slaves in the North. He only freed the slaves in the secession states. Does that ring a bell?
That's new to me.
No, I don't.
Well, we'll look it up.
He considered them already.
Yeah.
Maybe he considered them already freed in the North.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah, it could be. So, okay, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us this week. Good to see you guys. Did your trip to Utah go okay, Ken? Good. Long drive.
Got to do it again this weekend. We got other grandkids needing watched.
Oh, there you go. Okay. So how long is that? How long is the drive?
9.5 hours, depending on the number of potty trips stops that my wife.
About 400 or 500 miles. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, 400 or 500 miles, right? Yep. We could do about 500 miles in 8 or 9 hours. So
yeah, that's about it.
Good job. Well, I'm glad you guys are okay, back safely, and you're going to do it again
Saturday.
Saturday. Oh, wow. Okay. So you'll be back by next Thursday?
I'll be in Utah next week for next week's program.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, then we look forward to that. Okay. All right. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for joining us. Mary Margaret back in town?
Yes, she got in Monday afternoon.
Oh, good for you. Okay. Well,
There's happiness in Mudville
there
today.
you go. Good home cooked meal. Right. Okay. You guys take care. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on 4 Men in America. We will see you next week.
God bless America.
Yes, sir.
Pure adrenaline.
If you want to change the world, start off by making your bed. If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another. And by the end of the day, that one task completed will have turned into many tasks completed. Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. And if by chance you have a miserable day, you will come home to a bed that is made, that you made. And a made bed gives you encouragement that tomorrow will be better.